Welcome back to Unmasking Project 2025. I'm Derek, and this is Episode 2, America Redefined, From Civil Rights to Cultural Reprogramming. If you listened to our first episode, you already know that Project 2025 isn't just a government plan. It's a blueprint for control. And in today's conversation, we're diving into one of its most dangerous layers, the effort to reshape who qualifies for protection, recognition, and belonging in America. Back with me is Randy Allen Walker, the author of the Project 2025 Survival Guide. Randy, thanks for joining me again.
Glad to be here, Derek. This part of the project hits at the core of what it means to live in a pluralistic democracy, and the implications are serious.
Let's set the scene. When people hear civil rights, they think about laws passed decades ago. Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, Roe versus Wade. Are those the kinds of protections at risk under this plan?
Yes, and more. What Project 2025 lays out is not just a rollback of certain rights. It's a redefinition of who those rights apply to. The agenda is rooted in a specific vision of American identity, one based on religious traditionalism, gender essentialism, and cultural hierarchy. It's not just rolling back protections. It's reshaping the legal definitions of sex, family, citizenship, and freedom to fit a moral and theological framework.
Let's take that apart. Start with gender and sexuality. What's the plan?
One of the main thrusts is to legally redefine sex in federal civil rights law as biological, fixed at birth, and binary. This would effectively remove protections for transgender people in areas like education, healthcare, housing, and employment. Under Project 2025, federal agencies would be directed to stop enforcing any interpretation of civil rights law that includes gender identity or sexual orientation. That means the Department of Education wouldn't protect trans students. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission wouldn't investigate anti-LGBTQ discrimination. It's a full retreat.
And who's pushing this?
A lot of it comes from people like Roger Severino, who served in the Trump-era Health and Human Services Department and now works with Heritage. Severino and others like him argue that civil rights laws were never intended to include LGBTQ+ people. And under Project 2025, they want to lock that interpretation into federal policy.
Now, let's talk about women's rights. There's an entire section in your book about reproductive autonomy. What's in store?
They want to go well beyond overturning Roe versus Wade. Project 2025 lays the groundwork for federal regulations that could criminalize abortion through reinterpretation of existing statutes like the Comstock Act, a law from the 1800s that bans the mailing of obscene materials, which they claim could include abortion pills or medical devices. It also calls for defunding any program or grant that supports abortion access, contraception, or even education about reproductive health. We're talking about a systemic, bureaucratic attack on reproductive care.
Let's be clear, this is not just about reversing progressive policies. It's about using the machinery of the state to enforce a particular moral worldview.
That's right. What we're looking at is legal theocracy in slow motion. They're not calling it that, of course, but the logic is clear. The vision of freedom promoted by Project 2025 is freedom within a very specific set of moral boundaries. And if you live, love, or believe outside of that framework, you're increasingly excluded.
One thing you wrote that really stuck with me was this line. Project 2025 doesn't just police behavior, it polices belonging. Say more about that.
That gets to the heart of the cultural agenda. Project 2025 defines who counts as truly American in ways that are racialized, gendered, and religious. It elevates the idea of a Christian, heterosexual, nuclear family-centered model of citizenship, and everyone outside of that becomes suspect. That's why it's not just about what policies get enacted. It's about who they're designed to exclude or punish.
Let's shift gears to education. A lot of this ideological reprogramming seems to run through schools.
Absolutely. Education is a frontline issue in this plan. Project 2025 proposes eliminating the Department of Education entirely, shifting control to the states, and promoting school choice as a vehicle for religious indoctrination. They want to defund any school that promotes what they call radical ideologies, which includes anything related to critical race theory, LGBTQ+ inclusion, or comprehensive sex education.
So the idea is, if you control what kids learn, you control how they think.
Exactly. They understand the power of narrative. If you tell a generation that America was founded as a Christian nation, that slavery was a moral compromise, that gender is immutable, and that social justice is Marxism, you're shaping citizens who will accept authoritarianism wrapped in tradition.
There's also this huge theme in your book about redefining freedom, not as liberty, but as obedience.
Yes, this is crucial. Project 2025 constantly invokes freedom, but it's not the pluralistic, rights-based freedom of democratic tradition. It's the freedom to live according to their values or face consequences. It's freedom, as defined by submission to a certain social order. That's why religious liberty is elevated, but only for one religion. That's why parental rights are sacred, unless the parents support LGBTQ+ kids or anti-racist education. The freedom is selective. It's a tool of domination dressed as empowerment.
So if you're an immigrant, if you're gay, if you're secular, if you're poor, you're not part of that protected America.
Not under this plan. In fact, you're often framed as the problem. The rhetoric around taking back our country isn't abstract. It's about targeting real people, real communities.
Randy, this is heavy, and it's hard to process, but it's also necessary. Last question for today. What should listeners do with this information?
Start with awareness. Talk about this. Bring it into your classrooms, your churches, your unions, your dinner tables. Project 2025 thrives in silence and complexity. Our job is to break the silence and clarify the danger. Then connect. Join organizations fighting this agenda. Support journalism, legal advocacy, civic education. And most of all, vote, but don't stop there. Participation means more than a ballot.
Well said. This is not just an intellectual debate. It's a lived reality in the making. Randy Allen Walker, thank you again for this powerful conversation.
Thanks, Derek. And thank you to everyone listening. We have more power than we think if we choose to use it.
That's all for episode 2 of Unmasking Project 2025. In episode 3, we'll talk about what resistance looks like, not in theory, in practice. We'll share examples, strategies, and real steps you can take right now. Until then, stay alert, stay engaged, and above all, stay grounded in truth.